thinking whether we should waste much time talking about Russia and Ukraine here and not just concentrating on our bilateral issues and through that continental matters of our development
and the realization that Africa cannot be trading with each other through third parties. And this is a tendency on our continent. Before President Kagame to come to Rwanda would have had to go to maybe Dubai and then fly to Rwanda. So we want to clean up these distortions. Direct flights, road network, rail. In fact, I was talking to the EU yesterday in Lusaka. My last meeting was with the EU to talk about the Africa infrastructure gateway, Africa gateway, to look at more than just one type. So it's technology, communication, it's roads, it's railways. So we can move goods. For example, in Zambia, we have a surplus in food. One of the few countries we have surplus in food, but we can't move it to Central African Republic. We can't easily, and at a fair price. So these are the issues. So the issue of dollarization must be seen in the context of us integrating our economies for the greater good and being able to trade, invest and trade with each other without having to always quote another currency. And in there, you know, from the field, I'm sure, judging from your question, transaction costs we can reduce, translation costs, you know, we can reduce, foreign exchange exposure risk we can reduce. That is the story. So I think let's see that issue in the context of what President Ruto is saying is in the context of what we would like to do as a continent. And I can bet once we've done it, and we've done it properly, we make mistakes here and there, it will benefit an average African, an ordinary African. We need to cut on the cost. We need to cut on the rigidity. We need to cut on, you heard me talk about a non-stop border post, so that goods can move quickly from one country to another, deficit to surplus. And every country has a surplus in something, may have a deficit in another. But once we work together in that way, and we don't have to be limited by the rules around one currency, we can do things better. In a nutshell, that's what I would say, but we need the media to support this agenda. But I must also say that the best integration is one which delivers benefits to all the participants, not to one or two only. Because in the end, people start complaining. Those where the benefits are not flowing, they start seeing no value. And I think that's the challenge now we have, the technical inputs to structure this thing properly. I'm sure you're aware that we are talking of an Africa clearinghouse, financial clearinghouse. We don't have to go through to Manhattan in order to do a transaction between Rwanda and Zambia. That's where we are going. Thank you very much.
Adding to what His Excellency Hichilema has just said, or what President Ruto said, what they are saying is very important. But I would add, what is it that stopped us doing that, say, 10, 15 years ago? So we need to think about that, because it could have happened 10 years ago, could have happened 15 years ago. So there are other things we have to do, but they all stand on the political will of our countries in our continent and leaders addressing some of these issues that would enable us to achieve that if, and I think it is important. So when we are talking about African integration, starting with East Africa or different parts of our continent with integration. When you're talking about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, about trading and so on, all those issues come up. We should have done that long ago. There's nothing that prevented us. Yes, but at the same time, when you are trading and you want integration across the continent, you must address these other issues, and part of which you have raised. You've talked about visa. Visas enable people to move freely or with ease from one part to another, and people can't trade freely without moving freely. You also have to think about, indeed, that trading, fine, but through what currencies? So it brings up the question of the dollar. The president explained it very well. If you have to move around before, it's like you take a journey from here when you're going to Zambia, but you first go 5,000 kilometers. You make 5,000 kilometers and then you go around and come back. When it is just a few kilometers, it is 2 hours from Lusaka to Kigali.
Yeah.
That is still happening, by the way, in the area of telecommunication. You don't see it, but do you know that the traffic, when you are calling somebody from here to Zambia, the traffic takes another flight all around and then arrives. But
with course, additional
of course, every that route, everybody is taxing on the way. You are going through roadblocks. Everybody is having, so it ends up there with so these are things that are happening. These are real. But the ways to address them are there. We know them. We have known them for very long. So we have to address a number of other things before we arrive to the very important matters you have raised. The only thing I can draw from that, this conflict, which has had many consequences that have gone beyond that geographical space and affected those of us, say, in Africa and beyond and other places, whether we shouldn't be thinking even more about what we should be doing together, and each of our countries doing their best to make the kinds of investments that will enable us to survive no matter what conflict in other places. As of course we wish to have no such a conflict, so even to end them where they are, but to primarily survive the consequences of that. For example, everyone has heard of shortage of grains, of fertilizer, or all kinds of things that we need for food or input into our agricultural systems. So can we build resilient economies and have these sectors so that, because we can grow grains, we can have grains to feed Zambia, Rwanda, and the rest of Africa, especially given the agreements we have signed and the vision we share of self-sufficiency. so that we are able to weather the storm that comes from different parts of the... This is really my...
Sure.
For me, what would be more important, but this is not to sort of belittle or minimize the importance of the effort. You, the leaders of our continent, attempted to contribute to the peace that is required in that part of the world, but the rest of the world.
Yeah.
But I think putting them in terms of hierarchy, for me, the other one is more important, because even if you had solved this problem, it doesn't that there as we have seen, and I'm talking as a student of history, of what happens in real life. So instead of running after one problem and trying to address it, which is necessary to do whenever that is required, but more important, running after these efforts to prevent by creating resilience in our governance, in our economies, in our productivity, and I think this is where, yeah, but it doesn't stop people trying to do something whenever and wherever they can to try and bring to an end any conflict like that. Even before it affects our economies, it consumes people's lives. There are thousands, and really